Hi, I'm here today with Dr. Ben Gaddie. Dr. Gaddie earned his Doctor of Optometry from the University of Alabama Birmingham School of Optometry. He completed a residency in ocular disease through Northeastern State University College of Optometry at the Triad Eye Medical Clinic and Cataract Institute in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Currently, he's the owner and director of Gaddie Eye Centers, a multi-location, full-service practice in Louisville, Kentucky. Dr. Gaddie is a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry and past president of the Optometric Glaucoma Society. He's currently the co-chairman of the International Vision Expo meetings and a past president of the Kentucky Optometric Association. Dr. Gaddie is an industry leader and an advocate for the optometry profession, having achieved historic wins for the profession on the legislative front. Having published extensively in ophthalmic literature, Dr. Gaddie serves on the editorial boards of Review of Optometry, Optometric Management, PCON, Primary Care Optometry News, and Optometry Times. In 2011, Dr. Gaddie was inducted into the Oklahoma Pioneers in Optometry Hall of Fame. In 2015, he was selected as one of the most influential in optometry by Optometric Management, named a Leader in Sight by Bausch & Lomb, and was awarded the Kentucky Optometric Association Optometrist of the Year Award. He's co-founder of Keplr Vision, a private equity-backed firm with over 200 practices. Dr. Gaddie conceptualized a new model in the optometry space, one that I describe as providing a medical model legacy exit for doctors with mature practices. Keplr prides itself on bringing in doctors who provide exceptional levels of clinical care and top-notch local reputations. And I'm a Keplr doctor, so that's my disclosure. So welcome, Dr. Gaddie.
Hello, Alan. How are you doing, buddy?
I am fantastic. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I wanted to just start off by letting everybody know, the viewers know, that I'm particularly excited to interview you because, well, Ben and I have been good friends, and interviewing good friends is an opportunity to make them squirm. And as you know, I'm all about making my friends squirm.
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
I won't be too tough on you because there's always that payback, that Kentucky payback. I'm not into that.
Right.
So I want to break into things by, Ben is someone who has so much clinical knowledge to share, and he is a top-notch clinical thought leader. He practices optometry at the highest scope of practice there is. And what you've also done in terms of advancing the profession to get to that point is equally as impressive. This interview is going to focus on the latter because it's so important for young ODs to understand how optometry got to where it is. And you played such a pivotal role in that. And we'll have you back for a clinical discussion at a future show. But among all of your accomplishments, perhaps your greatest is outside optometry. And I just want everybody to know that Ben is a cancer survivor. Can you give us an abbreviated story of your diagnosis, where you were in your life when it happened, and tell us what you were feeling when it ended?
Yeah, well, I didn't expect that one. So, I was just finishing my second year of residency / fellowship there in Oklahoma, and I started to feel tired, and that was pretty normal when you were seeing patients from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. and then on call as well. And so I just kind of chalked it up to being tired. And then I started getting these arthropathies where it really hurt just to sit down and couldn't figure out, thought maybe I had arthritis, went through a lot of tests, and one thing led to another, and finally got some blood work done, performed, and it was irregular, to say the least. And I had just really kind of accepted a job up at TLC. It was the first laser and, anterior segment surgery center. It wasn't just LASIK, and it was in Madison, Wisconsin. And David Sullins, the late David Sullins, flew with me from Oklahoma up there to do the interview. He was very involved and, definitely one of my mentors. But I was all excited about taking the opportunity. And when I found out that I had a serious disease, it changed the course of my life. First of all, I didn't want to be in Madison, Wisconsin by myself going through blood cancer. So I moved home, and my dad is an optometrist, as you know. And there was a practice with my name on it. I've been in the community since, 1967 or 8. And, it wasn't quite the setting I was wanting to go into at the time. I, again, trained doing lasers in Oklahoma, really working in a tertiary setting to go and move into a primary care office where, they were practicing advanced scope, but nothing like I was used to seeing day in, day out. It was a struggle, but to be home, to go through that diagnosis, to go through the treatment, very fortunate that I had an advanced stage of lymphoma. And so very fortunate the treatments worked. There were plenty of scares along the way, but from Oklahoma to Louisville with cancer, somehow found my wife during all that period. And so they told us we could never have children because of the chemotherapy and all that. And so we have two beautiful daughters, 18 and almost 16. And so, you can't always believe what the experts tell you. You got to have faith.
That's a great story. And we're so glad you survived that. And apparently, no side effects still. You seem to kind of have your stuff together.
Yeah. And I have my hair. You can see, which is COVID. It's COVID zone right now with the hair in terms of frequency of getting it cut. I don't have your problem. We make it a lot easier, but I'm going to keep it for now.
You'd think at least I could have gone through, cancer and had a reason for having it. But no.
Well, I'm glad you have it.
I'm here, no cancer, thank God. Also, for those of you who don't know, in I think it was 2011, Ben was the champion for historic scope legislation in his state of Kentucky. And not only did this result in laser and surgical care privileges for optometry in the state, but it clarified the Kentucky Board of Optometric Examiners was the only regulatory body who could determine the current and future scope of optometric care in the state. Now, this is something I'm really interested in because it's so key. In my state, legislators look to ophthalmology, in their opinion, when it's time for us to go up for scope expansion privileges. And I always thought that for our profession to be regulated by another profession is wrong. It doesn't even make sense. Why should one profession legislate another, and why is that allowed to happen in other states?
Well, it is a complicated situation. It really depends on the state and the way that the government works in that particular municipality. But I think one of the reasons is that we haven't been able to both develop the relationships, and I think this is changing as we're seeing with recent scope victories, including Mississippi in the last couple of weeks. Obviously, folks have taken the lead from Oklahoma and Kentucky and then Louisiana, but that you can't just raise a lot of money for the political races and all that and not have a relationship. And you can't have a relationship without being involved in the political process. And I think once people realize that legislators weren't, it's not the president of the United States. These are your neighbors. These are people that work in your community. At least in Kentucky, our legislators are, they are part-time legislators, meaning they have some other sort of career. And so once folks realize that, hey, you elected them, they want to hear what's going on in their communities. They want to represent the district that they've been elected to lead. And so once you understand that they actually want your input and that maybe they become a patient, maybe they become a friend. I mean, all those things have happened in the course of my career, but it's that personal relationship and the credibility when you come and say, hey, this is something we're going for and this is why we're doing it. And we believe that we have the training and the knowledge and the experience to do what we're asking for. There's got to be that level of credibility there, and it can't just be on merit. So I think in other states, it's been a threat. Even in Kentucky, there's been the threats of reorganizing the boards so that the optometry board might report under one that contained podiatrist and dentist, and maybe there's a physician on that board. I'm just saying some of the proposals that we've seen in the last few years, fortunately, haven't happened, but you can see how really quickly one change of governance could wreak havoc on your scope of practice. And that's something that we all have to be vigilant about. And it's a job that never stops. But I enjoy it. I enjoy being involved in our state in Kentucky. I'm still involved with the legislative committee. Have a lot of key relationships that I maintain within our legislature, both in Kentucky and nationally. And I like reviewing bills. I like reading bills. I like seeing the legislative intent of something. Why, especially anything related to healthcare. So I think I missed my calling as a politician, but you and I have talked enough to say that I would never put my family through that, nor myself at this point in my career, but something I probably missed my calling on.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I'd say politicians aren't always in legislators. You've been quite the politician in our profession, and you've been a politician. And when I've wanted to make some decisions that weren't probably the best decision, I've come to you for advice, and it's always level headed. So I think you are a good politician, even though you're not an elected politician.
That's right.
But back to the politics, you and Dr. David Cockrell, who's a past president of the AOA from Oklahoma, debated the American Academy of Kentucky and the Academy of Ophthalmology, which turned into a historic and legendary debate. Your performance, both of you, were infallible. And for those of you who never saw this, it's on YouTube, and I'm going to put up a link to that right here. Walk us through that day. What happened in the aftermath?
Yeah, and as I do, I'd be completely remiss if I didn't add in the great team we had in Kentucky. I may have had a lot of the FaceTime in the committee hearings and TV and things like that, but our executive director at the time, Darlene Aiken, was really just a mastermind at the things I was talking about relative to legislation, from writing it to reading it to interpreting it. And I always remember she said, "You pass the law, I'll write the regulation," meaning she just really understood how to meaningfully enact legislation. And so with her guidance and the guidance of, icons in the profession, from Joe Ellis to Bill Reynolds to, I could go on for days of the colleagues that were involved, but we really had a special group of doctors that just got it. And I think that all started at the top with our executive director. And so with that team, and we had that day, so David Cockrell had come in to help testify in our Senate committee meeting, a meeting in which, we had a prominent ophthalmologist in our community say that, we didn't know how to use a stethoscope. We didn't know how to do this. We didn't know, it was one of those days. And David flew in, and as soon as he got to Lexington, he got food poisoning. And so, when he got to Frankfurt, he got food poisoning. And he was sick. He was green. When we walked out of the KOA office to walk up to the Capitol, he looked like the color of the wall. And I'm like, oh no, this isn't going to be good. And so he had been just a huge trooper. And when we found out, we only had a couple of days notice that we were going to be on this television show. And we found out that Cynthia Bradford, who's at the time head of advocacy for the Academy of Ophthalmology, was coming in from Oklahoma. We knew that they would likely try and make some claims about Oklahoma's participation in laser, and maybe even, allude to problems that were happening. And as soon as I found that out, I called David. I said, "Hey, you got to come back. I know you were just here, Friday, but you got to come back Monday." And I was literally prepared to figure out a way to fundraise, to charter a jet one way to get him there. It was just going to be that crucial for him to be that kind of that co-pilot with me for that day. And I'll never forget, it was the worst weather day ever. It was just pouring buckets of rain, and I had to go after clinic. And we had already passed the bill through the House, through the Senate. It was on the governor's desk, and we knew the governor was going to sign it. And to have to go, after all of that, go on public television and relive it all and go through all that. We had our swagger because we had just fought it, like literally the real fight. And we knew that our bill was going to be a success. And it was just a really weird being in the green room. All four of us had to be in a green room with the makeup and all of that. And then we all sat there for like 30 minutes before it started. You want to talk about awkward? Oh my God. It was like the most anxiety provoking moment. And anyhow, suffice it to say, they were fine enough individuals, and have nothing personal against any of them. But as the night ensued, you could see very quickly that we were going to control the narrative, that we were confident in the plan that we had brought forward to the legislators, and what we were going to do to try and help the citizens of Kentucky. And it was apparent.
Yeah, you were calm. I remember I got to rewatch it, but you were calm, cool, and collected. The other side, they kind of lost it. They kind of they got emotional. They snapped. They said some things that they couldn't back up when asked, and it's really great TV.
Yeah, I mean, the seminal moment, in case you don't get a chance, the viewers out there to see the whole thing, is they started in on us about, you would never get on a plane with a pilot, that hasn't gone through their certifications or whatever it was, and trying to say that, who wants to be on that first flight, basically. And David so, beautifully laid out, of course, he's a pilot and he's a check writer and all this stuff. And he says, you could go through all your pilot training and education, and the check writer may or may not have a college degree. They may or may not have a high school degree, but they have gone through all the certifications. I mean, just destroyed piece by piece by piece, maniacally, every single argument that they had. And it was one of the most satisfying things to sit there and listen to that I think I've ever been a part of.
Well, we're proud of you guys. I watched that. And it just reminds me how awesome you guys were and are, and we're glad to have you in our profession. Now, subsequent to that, you succeeded in building one of the few optometric laser surgery specialty clinics in the country, even 10 years later or more now. As a result, you're one of the earlier optometrists who dedicated almost all your clinical time to medical eye care. Were you planning this before that victory went down?
Well, in all honesty, back 3 years before we actually geared up to do the legislation, we were talking about, like, why do this? Is it worth it? And they came to me and said, look, you'd obviously be an integral part of this fight because of your experience and everything else. And I told them, look, I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know if that fight is worth it. Like, you got to decide what you want to do. And so with that, we quickly realized that there's a big group of people that were going to support it and do everything in their power to see it successful. They never had any intention of performing a laser procedure or cutting out a chalazion or whatever else. And then we had a group of super users, if you will, that really you knew they were going to have a high volume, especially those in ophthalmology, ODMD settings. And then you had a few, a solid group of ODs that just had great community medical-based optometry practices. And so they were ready to go. They had the patient base, and it did what we said it was going to do, which was to increase access in a lot of rural Kentucky. We are one of the most impoverished states. At our Medicaid rolls, you look at our poverty levels, it's a state in need, and there's not eye doctors in all this impoverished areas. So, I should say, eye surgeons. So it's been a good delivery for the people of Kentucky, and for us, it breeds. You start seeing glaucoma patients, and you realize the value of SLT. So why do I have a patient who's 50 years old or 60 years old? Why do I want them to have all the cosmetic changes associated with PGAs, or trying to remember to take them, or not being able to wear their contact lenses because their eyes are drying out? Why not do laser? You can do a 5-minute procedure, and the studies show it works just as well as drops, if not better. And so you start to get that mindset, and you believe in what you're doing. And when you do, as you work with your patients, it just comes to fruition, is all I can say. And instead of just referring things out of ease, you got to be committed to it. It might be easier to send that patient out to an ophthalmologist for a YAG versus me going to a surgery center and, carving out 3 hours of my day to go do maybe 1 or 2 YAGs. But that's how you have to start. And I think those people that have been committed to it, that enjoy it and have a passion for it, are doing just that.
That's great. And it's so important that our young viewers hear this story so they can continue that fight. And I'm quoting you here from an article that I read that you wrote, or you were quoted, and you said, generations of optometrists have given their souls to be granted authority to use diagnostic, therapeutic, and now surgical privileges in our practices. Like you, I'm the son of an OD, and my dad fought the battle to get diagnostic drops in Maryland. And in the early 80s, he always said that's what turned his hair gray. You wouldn't know him as son. He had hair. But, I think you're pointing out that what we have now, and what you especially have now in Kentucky, was built on the backs of the dedicated professional servants who came before us. So share with the viewers the importance of getting involved in volunteering time, donating to legislative efforts in both supporting their state and national organization?
Yeah. So first of all, Alan, I mean, think about it's ubiquitous, the need for advocacy within optometry. You could be in a private practice setting, you could be in an ODMD setting, you could be in a Walmart, you could be in a Vision Works, you could be in any kind of setting, academic, and the need for advocacy within our profession is there. All right. And so what most people do is the 80-20 rule. 80% let the other 20% do the vast majority of the work. And when you're talking about something as important as legislative advocacy, that's not going to, 20% doesn't win elections, right? 80% wins elections. And so really just, one of the things I really commend our new executive director at our KOA, Dinah Bevington. They've started a mentoring program for advocacy, and they're taking young doctors that are, graduating and going into community practices and recruiting them to, train them how to talk to legislators, how to, call them and say, hey, I've got a bill I want to discuss with you, to how can I help with can I do a fundraiser? Can I go out walking door to door, putting signs up for your race? And at first, you're not going to have a lot of extra money, and the thought of donating to a political campaign. I mean, look at you and I've spent a lot of our personal time talking about, kind of the state of politics. Like, who wants to go out and say, yeah, I want to get my hard-earned, my first dollars. I paid off some of my student loan. I've gotten a car. I've, bought my first house. Now let me send my personal money out to this legislative process that just seems awful, right? And it's a hard thing to get over. It's probably the biggest obstacle that we see amongst the younger generation is they want to help, and they're very they have a lot of creativity on how they want to help. But this one area is an area that we just try and convince doctors, start small. I mean, if you can give $25 to a race to somebody that's in your community, they see your name and they see you're an optometrist. And then as you're doing, better in your career, do more. The better you do, the more that's expected of you in terms of paying back your profession. But until you realize that no one is going to look out for you at all, ever. If anything, you're on the menu, right?
Right.
No one is there to look out for you. And the only groups that is going to do that is the American Optometric Association, our state association affiliates. And I know there's been all kinds of historical political crap going back to when your dad was there, my dad was involved. And, I'm sure AOA has done quite a few things to tick off a lot of members. But at the end of the day, without them, all of these scope things we're talking about would be non-existent. The protections we have on the federal level would be non-existent. Our participation in medical healthcare in general, we would still be in the jewelry store days. So, I mean, it's just something you have to do, even if you feel like we see the fat cat syndrome a lot too. So I've got all these great tools, all these people before us fought, and we have lasers. So we don't need to do anything now, right? And you're one stroke away of a pen from losing everything, is what I like to say.
That's right. Just because you gain it doesn't mean you can't lose it. And I always said in ODs on Facebook, especially, that when you're in business, no matter what business, inside, outside optometry, everyone's trying to take a piece of your pie. And you have to, the way we defend our pie and take a bigger chunk of our pie is through this process that we're discussing. And another point is, this is really important for the young people. If your practice isn't growing, it's dying, because there's always a certain amount of people that aren't coming back. So the way that you keep it growing is by expanding your privileges. And also, I always say, if you can't afford at this point to donate money, donate time by helping to raise money. And if you can't do that, then donate money, but please try and do both, of course, if you can. It's so important. And yeah, so, that slice of the pie is critical here. And people just don't grasp that. They don't understand how having that one extra disease we could treat brings in, let's say you donate $1,000 to your state association, you're going to make $3 to $7 to $10 or more $1,000 treating that condition that you just, invested in.
It is an investment. And, you always got to couple it with, are we doing this for the right reasons? Like, I see so much legislation in and outside of optometry that I look at and I go, so what are you going to accomplish with this? Like, what is really going to happen with this legislation? And I see it sometimes at our attempt to pass something that we think is going to be good it has mute effect. It has no effect, and so that's the worst kind of advocacy that you can have. But as an example of what advocacy in optometry has done just for me on a local level during the pandemic, right? So the whole country got shut down, understandably, but we quickly realized, because we were doing emergency care only, that we were getting, between 4 offices and 10 doctors, we were getting 50, 60 calls a day just for what patients consider to be emergent care, and working with our state association, having a relationship with the governor, having a relationship with the health commissioner, having those relationships, we were able to demonstrate why optometry needed to be open. And instead of being closed for 2, 3, 4 months, like many states or more, we were down for about 2.5 weeks. And I think it really was because of the advocacy of our state association.
It's a unique situation, but a great example of how, you got to stay on top of it, because you don't know what's going to come down the road that you try and hurt you.
Yeah.
Well, you and I have the benefit of hindsight at our age. We can look at the trail that we blazed and where it got us. All of it is a function of where our profession was during the 30 or so years that we practice, and not that it's over or anything. Optometry is different now. I'm not going to say it's better or worse. I'm not going to make that kind of an argument, but it's just different. What trail would Ben Gaddie blaze graduating in 2021 in this different environment? What would you think?
Wow. That's a great question.
A great question.
Yeah, well, if you stop and think about it, it kind of goes to a topic I'm sure we'll get to later, is about private equity and consolidation and in the marketplace of optometry. I think most of us went to optometry school with aspirations of getting out and starting a practice and owning a business and, being successful and eventually selling that to somebody coming out of optometry school and seeing the thing perpetuate and building something that had an impact in the community. Today, and not that opportunity doesn't exist, I just don't think it's very feasible. I don't see how you come out of school with $200,000-$300,000 of debt and go and try and get a loan and get the capital that you need to be successful. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying that it's a different mindset that I would probably have coming out of my 4th year today than I had coming out of my 4th year in 1997. So for that reason, I would probably do one of 2 paths. One path that I regret not doing, that I think is an excellent opportunity for doctors that are starting optometry school or even before, is the military route. Being involved in the Armed Forces Eye Care group, having your school paid for, living expenses, coming out as an officer, serving your country, having a pension for the rest of your life, effectively having a residency with the experience that you would get in some of the settings that you could go into, and the career opportunities you would have from there. To me, in retrospect, that's a no-brainer and a big regret that I kind of had. Unfortunately, things have turned out as well as I could ever expect, but that would be a route that I still think I would like to see.
Yeah. And in terms of practice ownership, I agree with you on one sense. The other sense is a lot of people don't understand that even with debt, there's good debt and bad debt, and a student loan is good debt because you've invested in yourself. You bring up your earning potential right when you get out of school. And if you have other sources of income, or maybe you get a really super job, or maybe you have a spouse, if you pull your resources and you marry it to a budget, you can own a practice. You may be low on income for a few years, but that doesn't last more than 2 to 5 years, and boom, you're out there. I love the military option though, because you're out even younger with less debt. So that's really great advice. You touched on private equity. So I think this is the point we'll transition into that talk.
Okay.
Now in 2017, Ben and Jay Binkwitz, who's another thought leader in our industry, created what is now Keplr Vision by raising funds and merging, I think it was your 4 practices. And then you came and you got me, and I joined as the first practice for outside of your practices in 2018. And I wasn't ready to sell my practice at the young age of 50, but I was looking for a new challenge. And wanting to play a critical role in building something that was bigger than me and what I felt was good for optometry. And it just happened to be about the time we started talking. And frankly, the biggest reason that I joined was because I know that you and Jay are two serious guys who get things done, who know how to get things done. And, it's all about the people. And really, Keplr has the best people. The practices we brought in have been just amazing, huge, successful practices. Talk about your vision for what is now Keplr and what went into making it a reality.
Yeah, it's a fun story and one I'm glad to be telling from this side today. I'm not going to say the whole thing wasn't without risk and lots of struggles along the way, but anything that's worthwhile is going to be it's going to take some work and effort. So how it started really was these groups that are already established in private equity started approaching about purchasing our practice, and I was very reticent. I wasn't ready, just like you, with my father's involvement. It was a multi-generational practice, and it was my thing. Why would I want to sell that? What am I going to do after I sell a practice? And then I started seeing the money, the actual the value of my practice, and I was blown away. I had no idea. Again, going through the old valuation that we were taught in optometry school, and maybe heard at seminars, etc. I was blown away to a point where you got to stop and say, what's the goal of me owning a practice, right? Is it to give everyone around me a job, to have some place I can call my own and it has my name on it, and hopefully I do well enough that year to bring home some more money than my salary, and I have something that eventually I can sell? Well, when you're looking at all those things that you talk about and it's being bundled up for you and, significant amplification of value than what you're expecting, it gets your attention. And I was ready to move along with it. And I met Jay Binkowitz. I know Jay. We just happened to be speaking at this meeting in Calgary, Canada. And I checked into the hotel and I turned around and there's Jay Binkowitz sitting in a chair in the lobby. And I had no idea he was even speaking at the same meeting. And we both didn't have any talks until the next day. So we went out and had lunch, had like 2 bottles of wine, and we started talking about the fact that private equity was interested in my business, and I thought I was going to do something. And what did he think? And he said, well, private equity is interested in my business. Jay had a very large consulting business, and he said, I have somebody for you to talk to. It's Ann Cavanaugh. And so we, from the pizzeria, little high top table with our bottles of wine, we called Ann Cavanaugh and immediately hit it off, and later met in New York City and talked about this vision. I think you were actually involved in some of those meetings early on, but talked about a vision where we don't have to come in with a crane and take your name off of your building that you've had for 60 years in your community, 50 something years in my community. That goodwill is really important. At the end of the day, that's a lot of what you're buying is goodwill. And we didn't want to just chuck that out the window. The second thing is we really felt like we wanted to go after doctors that would want to partner with us that had the same philosophy of medical eye care and great vision care as well. I mean, most of our practices, we get our medical eye care from our vision care patients. That's where they come from for the most part. They don't come in. We do get a lot of direct, I have an eye medical problem, I need to see it, but a lot of it comes harvested from the patients that we see. And so shared vision for high-end optical, for, great service and great care and involvement in the community. And so we set off and started talking to private equity firms and trying to decide who would be a good partner for us to launch it. And we met with Imperial Capital out of Canada, and they had a dental business that was getting ready to sell, was close to maturity, and did extremely well. And it started kind of like how Jay and I started this. And so we chose Imperial Capital, and we started the business, and we acquired you about 6 months later. We needed to get a president, CEO, and get our C-suite filled out and figure out who the heck we are. How do we build this thing? Like, we have 4 offices. That's all we had. And then about 6 months later, or around the same time, Nick Williams and Adam Rosengren were doing their All About Eyes in Illinois. And they built that up to a really respectable level of practices. And they were meeting with Imperial as well. And so it turns out Imperial had two investments in eye care. And so we said, hey, why don't we put these together? Like, you have the best, supply chain, lab facilities, all the things that we really are missing. And, we have some of the doctor access maybe to a larger doctor base than you have access to. And so we married those together, and it's been a great kind of merger, if you will. But, now we're up to, what are we up to, Alan? Gosh, well over 250 practices, 34 states. Yeah. And so our message, I think our message was heard.
Yeah. Well, I knew you would get it done. You and Jay would get it done. There was no question. Still scary. And I wish everybody could hear every little bump in the road along the way, because there was some crazy stuff that happened. But, we were smart. We survived, and we did the right thing by our people. We stayed true to the mission, which was, as I coined it, a legacy exit for doctors with mature practices. And legacy meaning that they, their patients don't even know that they sold. That everything's intact. The name, the doctors can continue to work there if they want. And one of the biggest things that it was important to me that it was as good as it could be for optometry. And I know people would argue that when private equity is not good for optometry, and I would argue differently. That's something we'll save for another show. But one of the things that I loved is that by building this new type of vertical, we were creating in medical optometry employment opportunities for young docs so they could practice at the full scope of their training and education, where as opposed to having their only option being working in some type of location where they were pushing the refractive side at them and not allowing them to do that. And we have done that with 250 practices and growing. There are many more opportunities within this organization for young docs to be the docs they want to be. And I love that about it. So that's kind of what I hung on to there. What would you say to docs that are considering their next step options, and why might they want to consider Keplr?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things you mentioned, mature practices, and certainly we have some of those. But, if you look at some of the ages, I'll admit I'm 50. You were 50 when you did the deal to begin with. So I was 45 effectively. I mean, why would I want to sell my practice at 45? I have another 20 plus years of being able to generate income and still have the value of the practice. But I think the reason our model works so well is that the practices we do partner with do have ideologies on how we run our practices, how we see our patients, how medical we are, but they're also partners in our business, right? So, that's very different than some of the platforms where our doctors actually are shareholders in our new entity of Keplr. And so it's not just like I've sold and I'll work as hard as I want to work. And what happens to the value of that investment when that happens? But we're all aligned, I think, in a lot of ways, monetarily, philosophically, and most importantly, how we interact with optometry. And we have I hate to diverge from your question, but we have our Keplr advocacy program where, we work kind of behind the scenes to help advocate for optometry, not necessarily for Keplr, although ostensibly it would benefit Keplr. But, we have David Cockrell, myself, David Nelson, former AOA president, Dr. Heitmeyer down in Senator Heitmeyer in Louisiana that was in the legislature and helped usher their bill to passage in Louisiana. I mean, we have folks that are very involved in what happens and cares about the profession. And so I think those are the reasons why we're successful. And where would a doctor want to look, and why Keplr? I think that you should be looking at your options. What's it going to look like in 5 years? What's it going to look like in 10? And I know that's probably your next question for me. What does it look like? And I think that there's a chance that you could see 5-10 years from now, everybody going out on their own again, right? You could have that. You could have consolidation within, you could be an employee of Versant, who owns owns all the insurance, Davis Insurances, labs. You see the vertical integration going on. And so it concerns me, like, what happens to the OD? You're going to be working for VSP, or are you going to be working for IMED, or are you going to be working for, Anthem, or are you going to be working for a big conglomerate? And I think that the desire to have flexibility and ultimately still be your own boss is going to preside. I think there's still going to be opportunities, but I think that Keplr is a great opportunity because of the partnership, because you have an opportunity to stay involved in your practice, and you have an opportunity to participate in the success of the business. And I think that's really the three reasons we get into practice.
Maybe I'll have you back and we'll have a real detailed private equity discussion, because I got a lot to add to that, but limited amount of time. I want to move on, and we're going to wrap it up soon, but we'll talk about two people, well, more than two, but start with two people who are really important to you in your life. Tell us about your close personal relationship with optometric legend Larry Alexander.
Yeah, Larry, when I went to UAB, Larry was still teaching at UAB, and my freshman year, our first year, we were having a dance party for a class, and Larry and Lynn Alexander showed up, and I'm like, wow, he's a legend. Like, why is he at our little first year mixer? We're all standing around basically doing nothing. And he walks up to me and he goes, "Get out on the dance floor. You're just a damn optometrist. Just get over it and get out here and party." And, basically making us do shots and everything else. And I'm like, who is this guy? Like, he's insane. And so we became friends, and, he basically became a mentor to me, and he moved to Louisville. And when he moved to Louisville, he began working for some ophthalmologists, and it was a rocky start for him. He was working at a retinologist. He was probably one of the first ODs to work as a full-time clinician in a retina practice. So he's in there diagnosing and saying, okay, they need laser, they need surgery, they need this or that. And so when it came time for me to do an externship, well, every summer I would come home, I would spend time with him. But when it came time to do an externship, I chose to do it with Larry, one of mine with Larry, and he just really changed the course of my life. His clinical intuition, to be able to just listen to somebody and then really, truly listen to what people are saying, and then look in the eye momentarily and know exactly what was going on. I've never seen anything like it. And I feel like he somehow, by osmosis or some other act of God, gave me some of that. And, every time I see patients and I start thinking, I'm looking at the retina, if I really have to start grounding my mind, I think about Larry, and I see and I hear Larry all the time. But he was such a good guy to my family, to my kids, to my career, helped me land my residency, really has helped with every aspect, got me into lecturing, despite he warned me not to do it, that be careful what you wish for, because you'll probably never be home. And, he was right. But he passed away, and it was a really shocking day. It was Vision Expo East. We were in New York, and it was a really, really heavy day. We miss him.
Loss for you and for optometry as well.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the other, I don't know if the most influential, but definitely the most influential OD in your life would be your father, Bruce Gaddie. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, so Dad's retired now. He spent about 3 years. He's in great health, so very fortunate both he and my mom are still doing well. But, growing up as the son of an optometrist was interesting. It was cool that your dad was a doctor and they're specialized, and but I never really thought I wanted to be an optometrist. That was never in my brain. In fact, I thought there's no way I'm ever going to be an optometrist. And things happened, and I got into optometry, and I quickly realized that, he was really good at what he did. He was good with patients. He may not have been a Larry Alexander in terms of diagnosing retinal vein occlusions, but he knew how to manage patients. And he was really an icon in the early days of contact lenses. In terms of especially gas permeable lenses, and later sclerals and cones and all of that. He just self-learned it, and he really had a nose for it, an intuition, and he was a problem solver. And those are all the things that, I kind of pride myself on. Obviously, I've kept up didactically and research and everything else, but at the end of the day, when you're in that exam room, you're managing a patient. You're not thinking about what drugs you might prescribe to make some drug company happy, or what lenses you want to prescribe to make some rep happy, or what. You're in there to help a patient. And that's what Dad brought to me clinically. Okay. But great father, a great mentor, a guy that if you talk to people, I think the consensus would always be amongst colleagues, always did the right thing, always stood up for what was right. And I feel like I got a lot of that from him.
That's excellent. Sounds like my dad exactly, like same time frame too. That's great.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
you have a lovely wife, Angie, and your daughters, Sloan and Georgia.
Yeah, so I'll start with my daughter Sloan is a freshman at the University of Alabama. So roll Tide roll.
Roll Tide.
I'm a huge Kentucky fan. We didn't talk about that. Seasoned football, basketball holder, lifelong bleed blue. My daughter goes to Bama. Well, so at least they're good at things. They're good at football, right? They just won like their 30th national championship in a decade. And in basketball, I'll tell you what, I think they can win it all the next week or so. So really pulling for them, but she's having a blast at Alabama. Just couldn't be more proud of her. And then Georgia's my youngest daughter. She's 16, almost 16. She'll be 16 in a few months, and she is dedicated to dance. So she is literally 7 days a week. She's a world champion, been on 2 world champion teams. And she does everything from jazz, ballet, lyrical, all the expressionist dance. And she has got my gene for the stubborn, like sticking to it and, really trying to excel and perform. So, yeah, they're great. And then my wife is probably the funniest person I know. If you've partied with her, she's great. I mean, very lucky to have someone as extroverted as her to help balance me out. And we're a good pair, 21 years.
Very cool. Yeah, I love her to death. She's fantastic. You guys are a great pair. So I think we're going to wrap it up now. And thanks for letting everybody know more about you and letting them know what you've done. There's 2 big topics we got to cover, and one is P and one is, the clinical, which everybody loves to hear about. I think would you come back and do another with me to talk about some of that stuff some other time?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Might have to do a happy hour version.
I'm totally on board with that. We'll have to mix it up here a little bit.
We can talk about bourbons
in the studio and do that too. Like the clink glasses with you again. We used to do that all the time. It's been a long time, especially at live music. But anyhow, thanks for being here today, Dr. Gaddie, and we will be in touch real soon. I appreciate you, and so does the industry.